The Vrax, a species known for their peaceful nature, lived quietly on their lush homeworld. Their small, rabbit-like forms made them appear delicate, but their intelligence far surpassed expectations. What made them truly unique was their ability to empathize with other species on an extraordinary level, a quality rare in the galaxy. Though physically fragile, their minds were sharp, and they had mastered the cultivation of essence vitae, a rare and invaluable resource. This substance could prolong life, heal wounds, and fuel some of the most advanced biotechnologies in the galaxy. But the Vrax never exploited it for profit or power. Instead, they used it sparingly, sharing it with those who asked. Despite the importance of essence vitae, the Vrax were never seen as a threat. They had no military, no ambitions beyond their peaceful lives. This, in the eyes of the galaxy's elite, made them easy to overlook. They were simply guardians of a resource, not a force to be reckoned with. They were respected, but only for what they possessed, not for who they were. As a species with no military strength or political sway, their existence was fragile, even if their wisdom was unmatched. When the Epsilon conglomerate, a cold and calculating intergalactic corporation, learned of the extent of Essence Vitae's power, they saw an opportunity. This wasn't just a valuable resource, it was a goldmine. The corporation's leaders, driven by greed, authorized an immediate and brutal attack on the Vrax homeworld. Their war machines descended on the planet without warning. There were no negotiations, no warnings, only devastation. The Vrax were not warriors. They were not prepared for the onslaught of heavy artillery, drones, and genetically modified soldiers. Entire villages were wiped out in seconds. The ground, once fertile and green, was scorched by bombs, and the skies darkened with smoke. The Vrax, in their desperation, sent distress calls to the Galactic Council, pleading for aid. They hoped that someone, anyone, would come to their rescue. But the pleas fell on deaf ears. As their cities crumbled, the Vrax realized they were truly alone. With each passing moment, more of their kind perished. Families were torn apart, and the once thriving population dwindled to a handful of survivors. The corporation's forces showed no mercy, moving from one settlement to the next, obliterating everything in their path. To them, this wasn't a war, it was a business deal. They didn't see the Vrax as a people, but as obstacles between them and unlimited profit. Far away, the Galactic Council received the Vrax's distress calls. They saw the destruction, understood the horrors unfolding. Yet, when the Council convened to discuss the situation, they quickly dismissed any notion of intervention. To them, the Vrax were insignificant. They lacked political influence, military power, and strategic value. Saving them would only cause unnecessary conflict with the Epsilon conglomerate, a corporation with deep ties and influence across the galaxy. The Council made a cold, calculated decision: the Vrax were not worth the trouble. Why risk an intergalactic conflict over such a small, defenseless race? The resources could be better spent protecting more important species, those that contributed to the Council's power and wealth. The decision was final: no aid would come. The Vrax would be left to their fate. On the planet's surface, among the ruins of what was once a thriving civilization, a single Vrax elder, Erevin, took refuge in a cave. He had witnessed the destruction of his people, the razing of his home, and the loss of everything he held dear. He knew that the Galactic Council had turned their backs on them. As he sat in the darkness, weak and injured, Erevin realized the bitter truth: the galaxy had abandoned them. All that remained now was silence. The once bustling cities were reduced to rubble, the once vibrant forests now charred wastelands. The Vrax were on the verge of extinction, their legacy reduced to ashes, all for the greed of a corporation and the indifference of the Galactic Council. Erevin waited, his hope nearly extinguished, resigned to the fate his people had been sentenced to by those who saw them as nothing more than an inconvenience. Captain Marcus Kane and his crew of human mercenaries were hardened by years of conflict. Their lives revolved around contracts, missions for whoever had the credits to pay, but they weren't without principles. While on a mission near the Vrax homeworld, they intercepted a distress signal, faint but unmistakable. It was from the Vrax, a species many in the galaxy had either forgotten or overlooked. Yet, to Kane, it was impossible to ignore. He recognized the voice. It was Erevin, the Vrax elder who had once saved his life years before. Kane had been a young soldier then, caught in a desperate situation during a conflict on a distant world. His squad had been pinned down, cut off from any hope of rescue. Erevin, despite the danger to himself, had risked his life to lead them to safety. The Vrax had no reason to help them, no obligation, but they did it anyway. Kane had never forgotten that. Now, as the signal flickered across his screen, he knew he couldn't just walk away. He owed Erevin a debt, one he intended to repay. The decision wasn't easy. Kane's crew, seasoned and loyal, understood the risks, but this wasn't just about a mission or money. It was personal. They were mercenaries, yes, but they had a code. Protect the defenseless, honor those who had shown them kindness. And now the Vrax, who had been so easily dismissed by the rest of the galaxy, needed them. Word of the distress signal had spread quickly. It wasn't long before the Galactic Council contacted Kane and his team, delivering a stern warning: stand down. The Council had made its decision, and the Vrax were not to be interfered with. They claimed it was a matter of galactic stability, of maintaining peace with powerful entities like the Epsilon conglomerate. Helping the Vrax would mean going against both the Council and the Corporation. But Kane wasn't swayed by their politics. He knew what the Council really meant: they didn't care. The Vrax were insignificant to them, not worth the trouble. Kane wasn't about to let bureaucrats and corporate interests decide the fate of a people who had already lost so much. The rest of the galaxy could turn their backs, but he wouldn't. The team agreed. Defying orders meant more than just risking their contracts. It could mean becoming outlaws, hunted by both the Council and the Corporation. Yet, none of that mattered. The crew prepped their ship for departure, fully aware of the consequences. They had faced impossible odds before, but this time, the stakes were different. They weren't just fighting for survival or profit. They were fighting for something far more important: honor, loyalty, and the belief that no species, no matter how small or weak, deserved to be left to die alone. Their course was set for the Vrax homeworld. Upon arrival, the devastation was worse than they imagined. The once flourishing planet had been reduced to smoldering ruins, the aftermath of Epsilon's relentless assault. It was eerily quiet, the silence broken only by the distant hum of drones sweeping the area for any remaining signs of life. Kane and his team moved swiftly, knowing time was running out. They found Erevin deep in the ruins, barely clinging to life. The elder Vrax, once so full of wisdom and kindness, was now a shadow of himself. His fur was singed, his body weak and injured. Yet when he saw Kane, there was a flicker of recognition, a glimmer of hope. The humans hadn't forgotten him, even when everyone else had. Kane and his team quickly stabilized Erevin, but the elder had more than just gratitude to share. With a shaky voice, Erevin revealed a terrifying truth: essence vitae *, the very resource that had doomed his people, held the potential to be weaponized. In the wrong hands, it could become a tool of unimaginable destruction. The Epsilon conglomerate wasn't just after profit. They intended to harness its power, turning it into something far more dangerous than anyone realized. This information changed everything. It wasn't just about saving the last of the Vrax anymore. If Epsilon succeeded, they would have a weapon that could shift the balance of power in the entire galaxy. Kane knew they had to act, not just for Erevin, but for everyone. Time was running out, and humanity, once again, would have to step up where no one else would. Kane and Erevin huddled together in the shadows, their minds racing to piece together a plan that could take down the seemingly invincible Epsilon conglomerate. Erevin, though weak, still possessed invaluable knowledge. He knew the intricacies of the corporation's operations, the layout of their facilities, and the vulnerabilities they had overlooked in their arrogance. The Vrax, while peaceful, had always been keen observers, and now that knowledge was the key to their survival. Erevin pointed out a critical flaw in the corporation's base: its reliance on automated systems that were highly efficient but predictable. This gave Kane the opening he needed. Kane's mind sharpened as he formulated a plan, one that would exploit the rigid structure of Epsilon's operations. The corporation's forces were overwhelming in number and advanced in technology, but they lacked the flexibility and ingenuity that humans excelled at. They had grown complacent, relying on their overwhelming firepower to crush opposition. Kane knew that if they were going to win this, they would have to strike fast and hit hard, using the element of surprise and tactics the enemy wouldn't expect. He gathered his team, explaining the plan with precision. They would infiltrate the main base, which housed the command center for Epsilon's entire operation on the planet. If they could destroy it, they would cripple the corporation's ability to control their forces and maintain their hold on the planet. It was a dangerous mission, but his crew had faced impossible odds before. Armed with advanced human technology, stealth gear, adaptive weapons, and a few tricks up their sleeves, Kane's team was ready for the challenge. Unlike the more rigid military structures of other species, the mercenaries had a way of thinking on their feet, adapting in real time, a quality that often proved decisive in battles where numbers weren't on their side. The plan was simple but daring. They would hit the corporation's stronghold from multiple angles, using guerrilla tactics to disorient and overwhelm the enemy. Kane knew that the corporation would be expecting a straightforward assault, but that wasn't how humans operated. They would use the terrain, strike from the shadows, and make Epsilon's superior technology a liability rather than an advantage. It wasn't just about brute force. It was about outthinking the enemy, using their own overconfidence against them. As the team moved out, tension hung in the air. The corporation's stronghold was a fortress, bristling with automated defenses, drones, and heavily armed soldiers. Yet, the mercenaries moved with practiced precision, slipping through the gaps in the corporation's defenses. They had done their homework, using every scrap of intelligence Erevan had provided to avoid detection and position themselves for the attack. The assault began with a series of small, targeted strikes. Kane's team hit communication nodes, power generators, and other key infrastructure points, plunging sections of the base into confusion and chaos. The corporation's forces, accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with superior firepower, found themselves struggling to respond to the unpredictable nature of the human attack. Automated systems were jammed, drones malfunctioned, and panic spread among the corporate soldiers, who were unprepared for such a cunning and calculated strike. Kane led the charge, his team hitting hard and fast, moving from one objective to the next with brutal efficiency. They used hit-and-run tactics, striking at weak points and then disappearing into the shadows before the enemy could mount a proper defense. The corporation's forces were formidable, but they were too rigid, too reliant on their technology to adapt to the mercenaries' unpredictable assault. Explosions rocked the base as key targets were destroyed, and Epsilon's forces scrambled to contain the damage. Kane's crew, though outnumbered, fought with a ferocity and resilience that caught the corporation off guard. Each time the enemy thought they had them pinned down, the mercenaries shifted tactics, finding new ways to exploit their opponent's weaknesses. It was a masterclass in guerrilla warfare, and the corporation had no answer for it. Even as the battle raged, Kane never lost sight of the bigger picture. This wasn't just about defeating Epsilon, it was about sending a message. Humanity wasn't a force to be underestimated. They fought for more than just survival or profit. They fought for loyalty, for honor, and to protect those who had been abandoned by the rest of the galaxy. It was that conviction, that unyielding sense of duty, that gave them the edge. After hours of intense fighting, the corporation's stronghold lay in ruins. Kane's team had succeeded where no one else had even dared to try. The command center was destroyed, cutting off Epsilon's ability to coordinate their forces. Without their leadership, the remaining corporate troops began to retreat, pulling back to regroup. The mighty Epsilon conglomerate, with all its power and influence, had been brought to its knees by a handful of determined humans. As the smoke cleared, Kane stood with Erevan at his side, the elder Vrax finally seeing a glimmer of hope. The battle had been won, but the war wasn't over. Kane knew the Galactic Council would take notice. They had ignored the Vrax, but they couldn't ignore this. Humanity had made its stand, and in doing so, had shown the galaxy that they would protect those they cared about, no matter the odds. The corporation's forces retreated, their ambitions for the essence vitae shattered. The Council, seeing the unexpected strength of the human intervention, would be forced to reconsider their stance. Kane and his team had done more than just rescue the Vrax. They had changed the balance of power in the galaxy. In the aftermath of the battle, the galaxy watched closely. The Epsilon conglomerate, once thought untouchable, had been dealt a humiliating blow, their operations on the Vrax homeworld reduced to rubble. The Galactic Council, initially dismissive of the Vrax plight, could no longer ignore the situation. Humanity's intervention had changed the game. Forced into action, the Council had no choice but to broker a treaty, recognizing humanity's right to protect the Vrax and prevent further exploitation of essence vitae. The resource, once coveted by the corporation for its potential, was now safeguarded under human oversight. The terms of the treaty were clear. Epsilon was to abandon its operations on the Vrax planet, relinquishing all claims to the essence vitae. In return, humanity would guarantee the safety of the Vrax and ensure the resource would not be used to destabilize the galaxy. The Council, embarrassed by their inaction, was forced to acknowledge humanity's growing influence. No longer could they afford to view Earth's inhabitants as mere upstarts. Humanity had proven its strength, not just in battle, but in their moral conviction. They had stood up where the Council had faltered, and now, the galaxy took notice. The ripple effects of this victory were felt far and wide. Humanity's reputation as defenders of the weak and oppressed solidified. No longer seen as a fringe species, they were now a force to be reckoned with, a species that others would think twice before crossing. But for Kane and his team, this victory was about more than just strategic gains. It was about honoring a promise, about loyalty, and doing what was right, even when the odds were stacked against them. The Council's treaty marked the end of Epsilon's ambitions, but for the Vrax, it marked the beginning of something far more important: their rebirth. With humanity's help, the Vrax began to rebuild. Though nearly driven to extinction, the surviving members of the species worked tirelessly alongside their human allies. The planet, scarred and ravaged by corporate greed, slowly began to heal. Human engineers and scientists, using their advanced technology and expertise, aided the Vrax in restoring their ecosystems and reclaiming their homes. The bond between the two species grew stronger with each passing day, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared struggle. As a gesture of profound gratitude, the Vrax offered humanity something no other species had ever possessed: exclusive rights to essence vitae. This rare substance, with its incredible potential for biotechnological advancement, became a shared asset between the two species. Humanity's access to the resource opened new doors in medical and technological innovation, benefiting not just Earth, but the galaxy at large. What Epsilon had once sought to monopolize for profit, the Vrax and humans now used to uplift their civilizations, ensuring that the resource would be used responsibly, with care for life and its preservation. In a quiet moment, Erevin, the elder Vrax who had once believed he would die alone, sat with Kane. His eyes, though weary from years of hardship, shone with something new: hope. "You did more than save us," Erevin said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You reminded us that there is still kindness in the galaxy, still those who believe in something greater than power and greed." Kane, though not one for sentimentality, felt the weight of those words. It wasn't just about the victory. It was about the legacy they were creating. The Vrax would live on, not as a forgotten footnote in history, but as a species with a future, thanks to humanity. The bond between the two species wasn't just strategic or transactional. It was something deeper, something born from shared values. The Vrax, despite their small size and lack of military power, had always believed in protecting life, in nurturing the world around them. Humanity, for all their flaws, had demonstrated that they shared those beliefs. They fought for more than survival. They fought for what was right, even when no one else would. As the rebuilding continued, it became clear that the galaxy had learned a powerful lesson. The Galactic Council, with all its political maneuvering and cold calculations, had been shown up by a group of human mercenaries who had acted out of principle rather than self-interest. The selfish calculus that had once defined galactic politics was now being questioned. Other species began to see humanity not as a threat, but as a potential ally, one that could be trusted to defend the helpless and stand up to tyranny. In the quiet reflection that followed, many wondered what it was about humanity that made them so different. They were not the strongest, nor the most advanced, but they had a fire inside them, a determination to defy the odds, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. It wasn't just their technology or their tactics that had won the day. It was their heart, their unyielding belief that no one, no matter how small or insignificant, deserved to be abandoned. For Kane and his crew, the mission had ended, but the story was far from over. They had proven something that day, not just to the galaxy, but to themselves. Humanity had been underestimated, overlooked by powers who thought themselves greater. But in their defiance, in their compassion, they had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten, that there was strength in standing up for what was right, even when it wasn't the easiest path. As the Vrax began to thrive once more, and as humanity's influence grew in the galaxy, the legacy of that fateful battle would endure. It wasn't just a story of survival. It was a story of defiance, of standing up for those who had been left behind. And in the end, that's what set humanity apart. They didn't fight for power or wealth, they fought for the things that truly mattered. In a galaxy filled with countless species and endless conflicts, humanity had found its place. Not as conquerors, but as protectors, as the ones who would step in when no one else would. The Vrax, saved from the brink of extinction, were living proof of that. And in the years to come, the galaxy would remember, when everyone else had turned their backs, it was humanity who stood tall, who fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves.